Today, we're going to look at what we can do to create a church council that works effectively, efficiently, and positively, with everyone contributing productively as much as possible. And I think we can all agree that that's a good thing to be aiming for. So when we work together, we are working in relationships. And last time we already talked about how important those relationships are when we're working as a church council. You can break the relationships down in three areas: a personal, a relational, and a more structural area. So there is the I, the individual, you and me, participating from our own point of view. Then there is the other. We meet in the relationships, and there is a context that we share partly with the other and probably partly not. So there is an overlap between me and you, that purple bit here, but there's also a lot I don't know about you, and there's a lot you don't know about me that is outside that little triangle. There's also the context. There is part of the context that we share, that we both know about when we relate to others, but there is also a lot of context that is outside that awareness, and some context that I have that you may not have, and vice versa. Now, they're right in the middle, that triangle, that's the sweet spot where we meet and where we are most effectively able to engage with each other, because we can work from the same page, as it were. Now, that personal bit, when we come to a relationship, to a working church council, what we bring as individuals, or what we need to bring as individuals, what is helpful to bring as individuals, is a bit of self-discipline, awareness of what's going on for ourselves and what may be going on for the other, empathy, and allowing for differences. And that's about that, being aware that I and you are not the same. Respect is one of the ground things that we need to bring when we enter into a relationship. We all crave a sense of belonging, and it's good to remember that you may be craving a sense of belonging, but the people that you'll meet in that space are craving that same desire for belonging, and an openness to what may be going on for others and what may be happening in the context. Then there is the relational aspect of a church council, where we need to think about the composition. So, for instance, if there's no overlap between the people in a church council, it becomes really hard to talk. There's also something about, numbers and stuff, but you'd need a little bit of overlap to be able to relate to each other. And it's good to think about that when you look for other people to join in your church council. You need relational skills when you enter into a relationship, and a working relationship like a church council, and it's good sometimes to work on those if you feel that they could have do with a little bit of work. It's good to be proactive, come in a proactive set of mind, and be aware of participation, not only your own, that you make sure that you contribute, but also that you make it possible for others to contribute, and that you're mindful of creating space for them. Structurally, what needs to happen, or what can happen to make that whole relational work of a church council work as optimally as possible. It's good to think about size. I've been on a church council with over 40 people. That can give some challenges that are really not necessary. When you cut down the numbers a bit, the communication becomes a lot easier. On the other hand, just 2 or 3 can be not enough. So I always think that Jesus with the 12 disciples probably had something going for him there. Thinking about the agenda, so preparing, like we talked about last time, preparing, thinking it through, not just plunging into the meeting, but carefully think about it, and perhaps also that remember that consensus agenda we talked about can help with time, but also with creating space to talk about things that are more important than some other things that may be on the agenda. Leadership is important. The chair of the church council, but also we are all leaders in church council. So we share that relationship, and especially in the Uniting Church, that's one of the things that we have in our basic convictions about how leadership works, that we share leadership in councils, and we share leadership as people. But having said that, in a meeting, whoever chairs the meeting, it's important that they have the skill and the support to do that to the best of their abilities and in a helpful way. Timing is important. That's with agenda setting, thinking through beforehand what you talk about first and what you want to talk about later, and how much time you're going to allow for different things. But also, my rule of thumb is after 9:30 at night, usually that, you know, good decisions aren't made after that time, or after you've been together for more than 2 hours. That's probably the maximum. That's when we start getting tired and grumpy, and accidents tend to happen in the communication and in the decision making. Environment is also important. Not many people stop to think about that, but the way you arrange your chairs, or even the temperature of the room, the lighting, all of these things are part of creating a space where it's easy to talk and function. Contribution is a very important thing, something to be aware of. Yesterday, somebody said, oh, sometimes we just go around the room and everybody gets a turn to say something. That's one way of making sure that everybody gets a chance. Some people need to think a little bit longer than others before they can jump in. So that's where it's important to get your reports and documents out beforehand. But also, if there's something that's complex or difficult, to just take 5 minutes, a 5-minute break, for instance, to allow for people to have that moment where they can get their head together and prepare for something to say. I'm one of those people that needs to scribble before I can actually say something in a meeting often. And yeah, where some people are just really good with jumping in, some others aren't, and it's good to take that into account when you come together as a church council. And last on this list, but not least, and maybe I should have put it at the top, the faith frame, being aware of what story we are all functioning in, and devotions, prayer, and Bible stories, Bible imagery is part of our vocabulary, but also of our toolkit. It adds to the way we function, and it helps to support us through what we need to do as a church council. There's more, but this is just some of the things, and maybe in the breakout rooms you can come up with more just in a minute. So we've put some helpful tools in your toolkit that may help you. The manual for meetings, which is not just a manual for meetings, but also got a lot of background information about how you go about organizing meetings, background information, context. So it's really worth going to that and having a look. The code of conduct, which are the ground rules about how we, the values according to which we interact with each other in the Uniting Church. And the code of conduct for lay people is something that Duncan is going to talk about later on. And then there are other behavioral covenants that are also worth considering. So that was my bit. First, an introduction into and a bit of thinking about, you know, what relationships are and how they function in our church council, and what may be things that might be helpful. And we're asking you now to go into breakout rooms and talk about what you found helpful in building up participation in church council meetings, and what helps you to have conversations that are both generous and effective. And it's an opportunity to share, to ask questions, to see if you can find some new things, or to boast about some of the things that have worked for you and that may be helpful for others as well.